To be frank, I just tried to fix the issue, but the thing is, everything looks normal here. Yes, that's the problem. So what I did is here, instead of using Hibernate for persistence for data access, we'll try using JDBC today. Let's see whether there will be any problems if you use JDBC template. JDBC Spring JDBC. We got Spring JDBC in Spring framework, which we can use for data access, right? What I'll do is I'll try to use this JDBC template instead of Spring JDBC. Instead of Hibernate framework. You see, we got a DO, right? I will comment this DO. So you see, I've commented the configurations related to this DO, which implements Hibernate. Which uses Hibernate framework to interact with the database. Okay. So instead of using this DO, okay, which uses Hibernate, what I'll do is I will use DO. We'll try to use this DO. So this DO, what it is using? It is using JDBC template here. Okay, to interact with the database. And the JDBC template is from which module? Yeah. So JDBC template is from Spring JDBC, right? So we'll see what if I use this Spring JDBC here. Will there be any issues? Well, because we were unable to work with Hibernate. Okay, Hibernate framework, we are able to use it, but when we are trying to use transaction management for that, it is not working. Okay, we'll see. We'll try to use this DO, which uses Spring JDBC here, to interact with the database. Here also, we got this. Add product. But the thing is here, how we can apply the transaction configurations and all. Let's say I'll do one thing. I want to do this. Here I don't want this method to execute under the transaction context. Let's say. Okay, I don't want this method to work under the transaction context. I'll do this. Propagation dot never. That means here we don't want this method to execute under the transaction context. Okay, never, it indicates that we don't want to use this. Now, we don't want to execute this method under the transaction context. Next thing here, what I'll do is, using JDBC, Spring JDBC, then you got a different transaction manager which you have to use. So not this one. You have to comment this code. The transaction manager which we have used earlier. So we will not use that one. Instead we'll use another transaction manager. It is known as data source transaction manager. So when you will use this data source transaction manager, when you want to apply the transaction management or advise the transactions to the DOs which use Spring JDBC template or Spring JDBC. Okay, the DOs which use Spring JDBC, to that DOs in order to apply the transactions. Okay, in order to apply the transaction advice, we'll use this. Transaction manager. Okay, in here it's beans property. It's a data source reference. Yeah, data manager data source. We have to change this here to data source transaction manager. That's it. So these are the changes which you have to do. Okay, just go through this once. What changes I have done? Just check this. You see, check the commented code. Let me label this one. Okay. So instead of this code, we are replacing this code now with this code. That means we are configuring a new transaction manager. Just check this once. Now what to do here? You know, what does this means? You see, I'm using transaction annotation here to configure the transaction details. Here, what I want to do is I don't want to use or I don't want this method to execute under the transaction context. I don't want this method to execute under the transaction context here. So let's see what happens if we use this method. So in the controller, we have to slightly change this, I believe. Add product controller. So the qualifier, we make it product DO, that's it. Product DO. When you see in the controller, you got add product method which will be invoked here. Okay. Let's see how it works this time. Okay. Now, we'll try to add this record, add product. 107. See, this record is not existing now. Okay, this record is not existing. I will show you in the database. Let's check once. You see, you got only 4 records, and you won't find the record whose ID is 107 here, right? So now we'll submit this form. I didn't submit the form yet. We have to submit this form. We submit this form. Yeah. You know what? Yes, you will definitely get the indexed parameter indexer. This is 0. Just a second. There is some issue with the parameter index, it seems. Let's check once. we were trying to use this bind parameters, right? Actually, named bind parameters. We cannot use them here. It was not possible. So we saw that we have also used question marks. Positional bind parameter. Okay. Now, let me run this code once. Okay. See, it is trying to redeploy. Maybe whenever we do some changes, definitely it will try to redeploy this. Okay. Now, so let me clear the console and try to add a record. Okay. So what we have configured is the DO method. Okay. The propagation is never. That means we don't want this method to execute under the transaction context. Yeah. So I'll show you here. If I submit this form, let's see what happens. Okay, it says product record added successfully. Let's say whether it is added or not. It is added. This time it is added. Actually, if I set it to never, it should never execute this transaction. This method should not be executed under the transaction context. Yeah. But it is executing here. It should throw an exception actually. We are not getting that exception. Instead, it is executing normally. Strange thing is, we never saw a single exception so far with regard to the transaction management, and even the code is not working. We are unable to apply the transaction advice here. Okay, I got a final option. Okay, I'm sorry. So I have to do this. In the class itself, we have to experiment it. So let's do this. I got a final option. What I will do is here, we'll go with Hibernate itself. And Hibernate, definitely you need a transaction. What I will do is I will configure the advice details using XML instead of annotations. I won't use annotations. You see, I will comment this. I won't use annotations to configure the transaction details. Instead, I'll opt for XML. So let's do this. This is the last thing which we have to do. Transaction manager, you have to configure the transaction manager details. What is the transaction manager name? Hibernate transaction manager. You have to give an ID here. No, not an ID. Yeah, we have to add an ID. TX advice. Now, you know what here? How to configure this transaction advice to that add product method. Generally, if you people remember, you'll find that if you want to use XML, if you want to configure the advice using XML, then we got some AOP elements which we have used earlier. what is that AOP element which we have used earlier? AOP config. No, AOP config. Okay, first of all, let me do this. Let me add the AOP namespace here. We'll configure it using AOP namespace. AOP, I'll show you. So let's configure the advice details using this AOP config. Here the advisor will be PX advice. We have to configure the point cut details, the expression here. So I want to apply the advice to that add product method. So what should be the point cut expression? We have gone through this in aspect J, right? You see, I want to apply the advice to the method add product. Okay, to this add product method which is in this package. Okay, in which belongs to this product D. Okay. So what should be the point cut expression here? The point cut expression. As in aspect J, we saw how to create or construct point cut expressions, okay, which we can use to apply the advice to the methods, right? What should be that point cut expression here? Yeah, can you type in that here? Let me see how many of you will be able to do that. Okay, here, so we'll do this execution. Yes, public. What is the return type of the method? Just a minute. Yeah, sorry. So the return type of the method is void, right? Add product method return type is void actually. You can check this. Keep it void. So I'll do void, and this method belongs to this package form dot basic dot app dot do dot input, right? Dot product do. Please let me know if I do any mistakes. Okay. Add product. So this is the method which we want to apply the advice, and add product ADV. Here, now you have to configure the point cut details. Add point cut ADV. Now, first of all, what we are doing using this element, point cut element, we are configuring the details about the target method. So that means we won't apply the advice for which method. We are configuring the target method details, and that point cut configuration has got an ID, add product ADV. And you see here, to this, we got advice code TX advice on top, transaction advice. We want this advice, okay, to be applied to this method whose point cut reference is add point cut ADV. Yes. So, here, if you have any special requirements, or if you want to customize the advice code, then you can do that. Okay, as of now, but I think this should be enough. As of now, this should be enough. Okay, yes. So what we are doing, basically, we are trying to apply this advice to the method whose name is add product ADV. Okay, yes. So if you got some special customizations, then you can do that here in the TX advice. I'll tell you later. Okay, so now here you see in this DO method add product, I'm not using any transaction management code. And if you don't use transaction management code, okay, if you don't execute this code method under the transaction context, it won't insert the record into the database, right? Yes. Okay, fine. So now let's do one thing here. We'll try to deploy this application on the server, and let's see how it works. First, I want to make sure that this details are right. Okay, let's see. And I store it Pankaj today. Let me see, Let me store them. Click on add product. Let's see what happens this time. Yes, the insert query is not executed even this time. Let's see. Oh, yes, this time it is working. Yeah. The annotations have got some problem, but XML stuff is working here. Yes. See, I was able to insert it 108. You see, we got the record here 108. Fine. So let me explain this once to you people how this XML stuff works here. First of all, okay, you see, this is the same configuration which we did yesterday regarding the Hibernate Transaction Manager. Okay, yes. So here you'll find that this Hibernate Transaction Manager has got two dependencies. It needs two things. What is it? One is driver manager. Sorry, one is data source details and the other one is session factory. Yes. So now here the next thing is we use this TX advice to configure that advice bean, predefined advice bean. In the last class, I was showing you people an advice bean, if you people remember, predefined advice bean class. What was that? Yes, we saw a predefined advice in the last class. Yes. The class name, I want the class name. I want to remember. Okay, you're close. The name was transaction interceptor. Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Transaction interceptor. This is the predefined advice bean. That means in this advice bean itself, we got the transaction management code. Okay, in this advice bean itself, we got the transaction management code. And you know, here, how do we configure this one? How to configure this bean? You see, we don't use a bean element to configure this predefined advice. You know, here instead we'll use this element called as TX advice. We'll use this element called as TX advice here. Okay, so to configure that transaction interceptor. Yes, the thing is here, why we need to configure the transaction advice this way using TX advice. Why do we need to configure the transaction advice this way using TX advice element? Can't we directly configure the advice bean class transaction interceptor using bean element? Generally, if you want to configure the beans, you will use bean element, right? But why in case of transaction interceptor we have to use this TX advice? You know, there is a good reason for that. Because this transaction interceptor bean behavior can be customized. And if you want to customize the transaction bean behavior, you know, we have to configure those details in this configuration file itself. So here, you know, to facilitate the customizations, okay, that means to customize the transaction behavior or advice, transaction advice, to customize the transaction advice code which is defined in that transaction interceptor, you see, this kind of setup is needed. We need this element TX advice. Yes. Okay. Yes. How to customize the transaction behavior and all, I'll tell you. So this advice, now it is TX advice here. You see whose ID is TX advice. I can say that it is referring to this transaction interceptor predefined bean which contains the advice code. And now, here this advice, TX advice, you want to apply it to which method? You see the method details are provided using this point cut element. Okay, the method details are provided using point cut element. To this method we want to apply the advice, right? And here you see where we are mapping it. So TX advice should be applied to the method whose details are provided by this point cut reference. See, point cut reference here, it is referring to the above point cut configuration here. Yes. Okay. That's it. This is how it works. Okay. So I hope you people got it. So any doubts in this regard, please let me know. Okay. Okay. So hope this is clear for you people. Okay. Now, how can we customize the transaction behavior here? How can we customize the transaction behavior? So for suppose, okay, I don't want to apply the advice, transaction advice to that method add product. As of now it is applying, right? So what if I don't want to apply the advice, transaction advice to that method? Then what to do? So in that case, we have to configure those details in this element TX advice. So for example, uh, you see, actually we call them as transaction attributes. Using transaction attributes, we can customize them. So to which method you want to customize the transaction behavior? You see, add product. Already we have configured the details, right? You just need to close. To the add product method, you want to customize the transaction behavior. So you see, for example, propagation by default it is required. That means by default it will be applied. Let's say, what if I do this never? Never means I don't want to execute that method under the transaction context. If by any chance, if that method is executing or is invoked from the transaction context, you know what? That method should not execute under the transaction context. Okay? Yes, that method should never execute under the transaction context. That is what it indicates. Okay, fine. Now, let me run this code this time. Interesting. Okay, so here what I'll do is I'll try to add a product record. Okay, yes. Let's see what happens this time. 009. Click on, okay, I'll clear the console. As of now, the console is blank. Click on add product. Let's see. The record is added. Oh, it's added. Propagation. Just a second. The icon for it properly. T-Rex. Matter is let's say I'll do this. I'll use star instead of add product. What does this mean? If I use star, it indicates that I want to apply this transaction behavior for all the methods by default. For every method, I want to apply the same transaction behavior. Okay. Yes. Okay. 110. By default, it is working as of now. Even though if you don't. Okay, let's do one thing. Actually, this advice code, whether it is applied really or not, let's check once. What I'll do is here, I will comment this complete whole transaction management code itself. Okay. Yes. Let's do this. That means not configuring the advices, transaction advice explicitly here. Okay. I never faced this kind of issue earlier. Now, let me try adding the record. If I don't apply the transaction advice, let's see what happens. Okay. Now let's see whether this record is really updated or not, inserted or not. It is inserted. Oh goodness, my mind is blowing now. So that means even though I didn't configure this advice at all. I'm sorry, just a second. Oh, sorry. I did a big blunder here. What I did is, though I've changed it, here still I'm using the DO which uses product, the DO which uses Spring JDBC. What I did is, I didn't change the configuration here. I'm still using the DO which uses Spring JDBC, not Hibernate. So let me configure the Hibernate DO once. I'm sorry. I thought it was working with transaction management code, but the thing is, this is the blunder. So first of all, configure that this DO. You see, I've commented it completely. I didn't notice it. I'll comment this annotation stuff. Just a second. So first of all, without using annotations, I'll show you. So we should not be able to add the record here. Okay. Without using transaction management code or transaction advice, we should not be able to apply the advice. Okay, transaction. Without, we should not be able to insert the record. Now, see the controller will be using this DO. So the qualifier ID I gave it as product DO hit. See, this DO's arrays product DO hit. Now it will be using this DO which is Hibernate. I'm sorry, I made a blunder here. I didn't see this. Now it should not work without using transaction advice. Okay, without using transaction advice, that record should not be inserted. That is what happens. Okay, move on to let's do this notifications. Okay, this time you see this message, record added successfully, it didn't print in the console. It means this record is not added. Okay, the record is not added, you see. 112 is not there. Now let's do one thing. We'll configure that transaction advice. Okay, let's see using XML. We'll check whether this is working or not. At the end of the Spring training, we are stuck with this issue. This weekend we'll be done with the Spring framework. So just before that, I stumbled here with this problem. Required. Yes, we'll make it required. That means we want the transaction advice to be applied. Okay, let me once again check once carefully. No, again edit this form. We have to uncomment the same. So which has got the advice details. Now you got this arrow here, advisors add product it says. Let's see how far it works this time. Hope this should work this time. Feel like definitely it should work. Okay. 112 is not there. Okay, the record is ID is 112 is not there. You see, product name something item price yes 5 lakhs something like this. Add it. Again, it is not added because I didn't get the message here that the record added successfully. No, it is not added. Just a second. But it says it is advised. It is advising. Now, if we did anything wrong, we should not see this message. But strangely, you know what? We are getting this message that that ad product is advised. It says the ad product is advised, but when we execute it, the advice code is not executing. When we execute the application, oh, the whole class is wasted with the same problem. When it says it is it says it is advised. If you get this message, definitely, we can consider that the advice is applied. But when we are executing this code, for some reason, the advice is not executed. Okay. Let me do one thing. The last thing, I will add aspect JUP auto proxy. Is this element which is missing? I generally don't use it. Okay, let's see, because I'm using that XML stuff here. Let me see. Okay, let me run this code. I've added that one element, auto proxy. You know why we use it, right? Yeah, just a second, please. The last trial, okay, of the day. Let's see if it works. No, it is not added again. I read everything. I'm getting this message also, but still the advice is not applied. Okay, I stumbled here. So I'm sorry about it, but let me check once. Okay, what's the problem here? I'll seriously sit down here and completely take out some time today for especially for this one. I did this morning. Okay, let me show you some other project. Okay, so I'll show you the same things. I won't change any configurations also. Most of the times, everything will be same. It will be working, because in previous classes, in previous batches, I've done it many times. This is not the new thing for me, but I'm not sure what's the problem here. Even I'm not getting any error also. The strange thing is most vulnerable part of this problem is that I'm not getting any error. And you see, even I'm getting this message that it is advising. It says it is advising. Definitely it will apply, but this is not advising somehow. The problem also is not at all clear. So I think I have to debug the framework, that inbuilt method interceptor, transaction interceptor class itself one. I doubt, because I'm using Hibernate 4, I may have some issues with that. Let me check once and tell you, okay? Definitely will not repeat this problem tomorrow. Hope we should be able to fix this problem, okay? Because one day additionally is wasted for us here today. Oh, but I tried every possibility. We had two options, annotations, XML, so everything we have tried. Let me see tomorrow. Definitely I'll come up with some solution tomorrow, okay? Yeah, I'll stop it here today. And